Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Positive Post in Conversation. I'm Zazie Todd. I'm joined, as always, by my friend and colleague, Kristi Benson. Hi, Kristi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
I'm excited because we're doing this live today, and this is the first time we've done one of these in front of a live audience. And of course, later it will go out as usual on our usual podcast channel. So, as a podcast and also as a video on YouTube, but there will be a bit of a delay because, of course, we have a few already lined up ready to go. But it's really exciting that we're going to be answering listeners' questions today. So thank you very much to everyone who signed up to attend live and who sent in questions. We've got some amazing questions that people have sent in, and they are about both dogs and cats. And for those of you who are here live, you'll see that there's a chat box. I would love to know where you're attending from. And you will also see that there is a question and answer box, and you can feel free to use those throughout the webinar recording. However, the questions that we're going to prioritize are the ones that were sent in advance. So you can put extra questions in the Q&A box if you want to. We will get to them if we can. We will be keeping an eye on the chat box so we see what you're saying. And thank you so much to all of you for coming. This is really excited. Kristi's put our websites into the chat box for anyone who wants to go and have a look at what we're doing. And we're going to skip the book section just so that you all know. Today, we're not going to get to the books because we're going to try and fit in as many of your questions as possible. And it's great to see people joining from Durham NC, Windsor and Ontario, and lots of people from different kinds of places. So that's really exciting. And I think we better get to the first question.
Yeah, I think we better. We got a lot of questions. So our first question is from Jaden, who says, I play brain games with my 13-year-old dog 1 to 2 times a day. He is enthusiastic and maintains his concentration for about 5 to 10 minutes. Is this okay, or should I build his attention span? And I thought, when I read this question first, I was like, oh, I can't wait to hear what Zazie says about attention spans and if there's research on that with dogs.
And this is such a great question, actually, and it makes me really happy to think of a senior dog who is having the opportunity to take part in brain games every day, not just once, but maybe sometimes even twice a day. And I think this is fantastic. This is a wonderful thing to be doing. There isn't that much research specifically on this in senior dogs, but there's a little bit. And it tells us that senior dogs benefit from training. So brain games and that kind of thing seem to help. And I think a 5 to 10 minute attention span is great because, dogs are not going to be paying attention for hours. That sounds like a really good length of time to be doing this for. And so long as your dog is engaged, I think that's fantastic. And what the research on this seems to tell us is that doing brain games for senior dogs is good for them in much the same way that when people do things that keep their brain active as they're getting older, it helps to keep their brain healthy. And it's one of those things that is thought to help with preventing dementia, for example, in people. There's been some recent studies actually that show several modifiable things you can do that prevent dementia in people, and brain games is one of them, or keeping your brain active. And the little bit of research we have on dogs does show that training for senior dogs is really good for them. So this is a fantastic thing to be doing. Keep on doing it. It's great for your dog.
I loved how the question was wondering, is 10 minutes of attention span enough? And I'm like, I don't even think I have 10 minutes of attention span.
I think that's really good, and especially because this is a senior dog that we're talking about. I think that's really, really good. Okay, so thank you for that question, Jaden. And I'm going to move on to another one. This one is from Henry Stedham. He says, I taught my Chihuahua, Shisha, to recognize her written name. It was easy for her to do. Is there another thing that I can teach her? In August, she passed the AKC Canine Good Citizenship test.
Right. So I think this is kind of like a dog trainer's dream, as someone who says, what else can I teach my dog? I mean, oh, the light's shining from above. So I put some thought into this, and I thought, so if there's things that are going to be useful for an adult dog, especially as they age, I think husbandry training is definitely something that I would put at the top of the list. It's just something that dogs have to go to the vet. So teaching them to be comfortable at the vet, teaching them to be comfortable being restrained in the way that dogs are restrained, and having various husbandry veterinary things done to them. We can absolutely train our dogs to be comfortable with this. And the Academy for Dog Trainers, where we both graduated, and I work, has a set of free plans with instructions that you can download. So that would definitely be on the list of things I would suggest that anybody trains. For something like a Chihuahua, I think it would be useful if they're not already comfortable being picked up. Just thinking ahead about as they age, there's the likelihood that they will need to be picked up, and so I would say that that's something, and that's something that's included in the husbandry plans. But just for something extra to train, toothbrushing for sure. If you're not already brushing their teeth, dogs that are that size have a dentist in their future, kind of thing. I think that goes kind of without saying. So, and you can definitely train your dog to be comfortable and happy to have their teeth brushed. So I would do that. Again, for little dogs, something like going up a ramp, like things that as they age into adults that they might need for them to be comfortable. And then tricks. I think I just love seeing people who are having fun with training do tricks. And there's programs even that you can join into. Trickmaster is one that is a Trickmeister that comes to mind. It's a Pet Professional Guild program. And so all of it is very force-free. There's no anything worrisome about the training that they're sort of recommending. And you can go through levels, and they're very much like sort of, they're not super cute tricks. They're tricks that sort of challenge you as a trainer. So I think it's kind of fun. You're learning different cueing strategies, and then you're getting little titles, and it's all very fun. And then there are definitely trick programs that are absolutely for the cool, cute tricks. And who doesn't want a dog who does super cute, fun stuff, like party tricks? It's, training is so enriching and so glorious. So when the output is a cute trick, I mean, everybody kind of wins. But not all of those trick programs are purely positive reinforcement. So that's something, if you want to participate, just keep in mind that you may be having to make decisions about, technique choices. So those are the ones that came up to my head. Did you have anything else, Zazie?
Well, I love those choices, and they would be my first choices as well, I think, because they're such useful things for one thing, and then fun and interesting things. And I guess the tricks can be extended to maybe like parkour. If you like spending time outside with your dog, then you can teach them to get onto things and to walk along things and so on. And it is a type of tricks basically, but it's called parkour, and you can teach your dog to do different things interacting with the environment outside. And I think that's quite fun as well. Everyone who tries nose work with their dog seems to really get into it. So that's another thing, if you think you might be interested in that. Ultimately, that's something where you can teach your dog to be like a sniffer dog, like a professional sniffer dog, and they go hunting out a scent. And beginner classes are easy and they're fun. So if you like the sound of that, that's something you could try. I think it's best to go for the type of class where the dog is in charge, instead of you telling the dog where to look. Some of the classes have the dog decide where to look and you follow the dog. And I think that's a really fun thing to do as well. So yeah, I'm always a fan of nose work. I think dogs really enjoy that. And one of the things we say about enrichment for animals is that it's really important to involve their most important sense. And for dogs, that's the nose. So nose work is always a fun thing from that point of view as well. Yeah, I think there are so many great choices of things that you can do. So,
and a lot of these are kind of like extras, but just like I think we're both assuming that the dog already has a great recall, can wait at the door, and other sort of safety behavior. So if that's not in your dog's repertoire yet, then definitely I would put a recall probably at like the top of the safety list and train it. But I think that's something that is covered in most dog classes. So most dogs already kind of have that if they're already canine good citizens.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so the next question, we have two questions that sort of work together. Henry Stedham also asked, why does my dog always bark at people who wear hats? And then Linda asked, why does my dog want to bark at anyone or any car that drives by the house? I live on a cul-de-sac. This behavior began during and after COVID, didn't happen before COVID, and we did not have this barking problem for the first 5 years before COVID. So how do we stop this?
So I think these are both great questions, and they're actually very common questions. People are always asking me about barking. It's such a common thing. And it's important to remember that barking is a natural behavior for dogs. It's a normal thing for dogs to do. And for example, it's one of the ways that they alert other dogs and us to things going by. So a lot of barking is just watchdog barking. They're saying, oh, something's happening. But it can also sometimes be a sign that the dog is afraid of something. They might be barking because they've seen something. They want to alert you to something that is potentially fearful, making them fearful.
Hmm.
So, and sometimes they're just barking because they haven't seen something before. So maybe they're barking at people with hats, maybe going back in time, maybe this dog as a puppy didn't see many people with hats during the sensitive period for socialization. That's one possibility. I'm not saying it is for your dog, obviously. And this reminds me something I should have said at the beginning, which is that we can't give specific guidance on individual dogs. We're talking generally because, of course, we
Yeah.
can't get a full history on your dog in this time span. So we're only talking generally, and it's not specific guidance. But for some dogs, they will bark at people with hats because they weren't socialized to people with hats as puppies during the sensitive period from 3 until about 12 to 14 weeks, when we really want them to have positive experiences with as many different kinds of people, different things, different environments as possible, in order that they grow up to be friendly, confident adult dogs. Now, that's not necessarily the why in this case. It could always be, for example, that someone wearing a hat was once unpleasant to your dog, and they, or whether intentionally or unintentionally, and so your dog became scared of people with hats. That's possible too. And as for barking at things out of the window that they see going by, this is incredibly common. It is a normal behavior for dogs to do. And so because of that, the thing to remember is that we can't expect dogs not to bark, but what we can expect is for dogs not to bark too much. So we can train them to do their little bark at the beginning and then to stop. I don't know what you want to say about that, Kristi, because I know that you've got a lot of info about barking on your, you've written some fabulous blog posts on this too.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think when I hear those two questions, and again, not about any specific dog, and we would encourage anyone who has questions like this about their dog to reach out to a dog trainer. But someone whose dog is barking at someone with hats, I would lean towards the likelihood that that dog is a little bit freaked out by that picture. That's just a weird picture for that dog. It's like, okay, I like people. I like people. Whoa, what's that? You know, so I would say that dog is more likely on the kind of the whoa, what's that? That's upsetting me scale. Dogs barking at stuff out the window, I would lean more towards that being, less likely to be a dog who's upset. It's more likely that this watchdog barking that you were talking about is triggered. Um, so I would say if your dog is upset about something, what we want to do is make the dog not upset. So and I think you cover this well in your book and a lot of your blogs. How do we help dogs who are upset at something? We want to make them feel better about that thing, and then the barking goes away by itself. Because we don't want to be like, stop barking. We want to be like, you don't need to be upset. This isn't actually an upsetting thing. You think it's scary, but I'm going to show you that it predicts good things for you. So I would tend to go for a technique that helped the dog feel comfortable with whatever it is that's triggering that barking. And for dogs who are having watchdog barking triggered, which is sort of like they're not scared, they're not happy, it's just a thing that dogs do, like kind of like blinking. Then I would say we have kind of a lot of techniques at our fingertips. Yay, we don't have a scared dog, but I would say you can buy on sort of Amazon or other places, you can buy a sticker that goes on your window that obscures the dog level stuff and down. So the light still comes in, but you have the dog is seeing less, and that makes a big difference for a lot of dogs. And then you can also train another behavior. So you can train your dog to come to you and get a little treat. So they bark a couple of times and then they turn around and run up to you and get a treat. So you can train this other behavior so that they sort of see the thing that makes them bark is a cue to come to you and get a treat, or to do something else, run to their mat and get it, something like that. And that involves some training. And then there's always negative punishment. So timeout. So if your dog is truly not upset and is just doing this thing, that because it's part of their natural repertoire, you can say, okay, if you get, if you bark more than 2 or 3 barks, we give you a couple because you're a dog and we're going to let you dog. If you continue to bark, and some dogs who watchdog bark really bark a lot, we're gonna give you a 30-second little timeout, and that works remarkably well as well. So we do have a lot of tools at our disposal to sort of handle this type of barking.
Yeah, I think that's a really good answer. And, with my own dog, I decided I was going to let him bark at the TV, because when he first came to live with us, he was silent for months. He never made any noises at all. So when he first started barking at things, I was like, well, this is a novelty. This is a really good thing. It shows he's settled down, and I let him. And now after a while, I'm thinking, okay, now this is too much barking at the TV. But
Yeah.
But what's really interesting about teaching a dog to come to you for treats instead is that they will also then start looking at you for treats when anything else happens, and you learn what their category is of things that they think deserve treats. And it's not just necessarily people going by or things on the
Yeah.
TV, like seeing other dogs on the TV. But I think it's nice to know that that is an approach that works really, really well. So yeah, it's a normal behavior. You do have to accept some barking, but depending whether or not the dog is fearful, there's lots that you can do about it.
Yeah. And if you're not sure if your dog is fearful, then that I think it's time to reach out to a trainer, because if a dog is fearful, that's affecting their welfare. Like a dog who's watchdog barking for a minute, I'm not worried about their welfare. I'm worried about the dog's guardian's welfare at that point. But if your dog is fearful, then that's really something that we want to get on top of. We want to protect that dog, and then we want to change that underlying emotional state if we can't protect the dog.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so next up, Melanie asks, as a foster parent who takes care of 1 to 2 litters of kittens every year, what are the key steps to developing cooperative care for toothbrushing? What I've tried so far has either not worked at best or backfired. I'm fairly good at training the cats to not meow for food, to go into their carriers on command, to sit, to go to their stations, as well as vacuum and doorbell desensitization. But toothbrushing has me stumped. I want to send these kittens off to their best lives possible. Aw. And it would be great if they didn't need preventable dental surgery 10 years down the road.
I think this is such a wonderful question. And also, I'm so impressed at the kittens having been taught all these things already so far. That's brilliant. And this shows that you're also a really good trainer. So the thing is, I think toothbrushing is one of those things that is more difficult. There are things where the cat, or if we were talking about dogs, the dog tend to be a bit afraid, can often be the things where the training is much harder to do. And it can very easily backfire if you go, especially if you go too fast. And we all have that tendency to go quite fast. And so one of the things to do is to really slow down. And the other thing to do is to break it apart into even more tiny, tiny bits. So you do the training in different parts. You obviously you don't just go up to the cat and brush their teeth and then give them some treats, because that's going to freak the poor cat out. And that's obviously not what you've been doing either. But you might start with showing the toothbrush and giving the cat treats. And if the cat has already got a negative reaction to the toothbrush, maybe the toothbrush has to be a long way away from them. And you probably just want to build up to the cat licking lovely treats or very tasty chicken flavored pet toothpaste off the toothbrush before you do any attempt at actually trying to brush their teeth. And even that is probably going to be good for the cat, just to get, the toothpaste into their mouth is a start perhaps. But the other aspects of doing this is that you have to be able to hold their head and open their mouth, and that's something to train completely separately, and something that cats generally don't particularly like. But the added advantage of training that is that it's also training them something that they need to know to be pilled if they ever need to have medications in future. So that's really helpful, and it will help them with the vet looking at their teeth when they actually happen to be at the vet as well. So even if you don't succeed in all of this training, especially because you probably only have the kittens for a short period of time, even little bits of training in this direction are really, really going to help them. And then as for actually brushing their teeth, when you finally get to that point, take it really slow. Like just put the toothbrush up to their mouth and then give them tons of treats. That kind of thing, really, really slow. So the main thing is to take it incredibly slow so that you can tell that they're happy all the way through it, and they're wanting to take the treats, and they're looking excited to come and take part in the training. And the thing that I think is so common a mistake is to go too fast, and then instead they become a bit afraid. I don't know, you've probably got some things to add to this, because I think teaching a dog to have their teeth brushed is very similar to teaching a cat to having their teeth brushed.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about the separation of restraint and the sort of the implement, and I think that's awesome, that and they do need to be trained separately and then brought together. But I would also say, because it sounds to me like Melanie is really an awesome trainer, so I would say, if Melanie, if you are not using like a professional type production training, that now might be a time when you would find it really useful. You'd find it even more efficient. So I would say if you check out the Academy's husbandry project, it's for dogs, but you'll get some learning, or Jean Donaldson's book, Train Your Dog Like a Pro, which goes over how to do production training. So it's you start really paying attention to how many repetitions have I done, when can I push to the next step, when can I realize that the next step is too much, so then I make a middle step. So all these things, it feels like quite a bit of front loading learning that you'll have to do, but in the end you become this just like a cracker shot trainer, right? You'll be training much more quickly than you were before if you were just, sort of free shaping without a real plan, or so I would say, just based on looking what you already can train, if you're not already training in a production style, this would be something where you would be like, this really makes a big difference. So that would be my recommendation for that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, because you're obviously already a brilliant trainer. So this would be one way to help move through these issues and get even better at it. Yeah. Great. So we'll move on to our next question, which is, as the owner or family of our beloved, fearful and anxious dog who is fearful of people, if one would create a local resource list for fearful dog families, what particular guidelines would you suggest? Specifically, looking for veterinary and pet sitting providers with the knowledge of fearful and anxious dogs. And he or she says, I've contacted animal shelter staff, certified fear-free professional directory, certified dog trainers and behaviourists, dog daycare staff, cold calling vet hospitals, holistic vet services, local dog training businesses, and fellow dog owners of fearful dogs.
Yeah, I'm not like, I read that and I think, oh my goodness, I'm not sure I could add much to that. The only thing that came to mind, and maybe you, Zazie, have some more ideas on this, but the one thing that came to mind is if there's a service where people rent out their backyards or share their backyards, that is another thing where if you have a dog who's too fearful to even comfortably walk, but you don't have your own yard, or you just want to give them a little bit of novelty, which many dogs find super enticing, then sharing backyards with someone who maybe also has a fearful dog, or who's on one of the services where you can rent out people's backyard might be, but otherwise I think you've got vet care, you've got daycare, which if your dog is very fearful, is possibly not a good choice anyway, and trainers, and then just a community, because it is nice to have a community if you have a very fearful dog, for sure.
Yeah, and I think this question shows just how dedicated people with a fearful and anxious dog can be, because they really want to know exactly what will help their dog, and they learn what kinds of approaches people should be taking. And I think it really helps to have a good community of people. And this person, obviously, they've checked the fear-free directory, they've checked lots of different things. So I think this sounds like already an awesome local list. I think maybe I would add that some online resources might be helpful as well sometimes, because you don't always find everything you need. Sometimes it's good to have a community online too. So checking out blogs from reliable sources, for example, like Fear-Free, like the Academy for Dog Trainers, like our own blogs and that kind of thing. They can also be helpful. There's often a community around those. And obviously we've got a lovely community of people here with us today, which I'm thrilled about, which I think is one of the best things about my blog and this podcast and the stuff that we do together. So I think that feeling of community is really important and can really help, especially because when you have a fearful or anxious dog, you're going to have bad days some of the time as well. And it helps to know that other people go through those things. And it helps to know that whoever you're going to for help is actually going to help. And that's so important, because if you go to the wrong person, obviously this person knows what to be looking for. But if you go to the wrong person, which a lot of people do in the first place, then you can end up making things a lot worse. So I think this is a wonderful question, and I wish everybody would have such a good local directory. And the problem is that if you're asking in local online groups, often the recommendations that you get, certainly if my local online groups are anything to go by, they're not necessarily appropriate for fearful dogs, because people will be recommending things that they don't know necessarily enough, or they'll be recommending other things locally where the person perhaps might be very good, or perhaps they're using outdated methods, but either way they're not necessarily suitable for a fearful dog. So yeah, it's a really good question. And for finding things locally, I think if you know the local area, then it's much easier. But no, local spaces, I think, Kristi, that's a great idea. And local tennis courts, or sometimes a farmer with a fence field or something like that, will give you a space where your dog can run around and be off leash and the same
And
time.
then I guess the local knowledge about this is a park where people do actually keep their dogs on leash. You know, so if there's areas where you want to walk your dog on leash because the off leash aspect is problematic for your dog, then sharing that kind of information. Oh yeah, this area, you know, there are some on leash areas where people let their dogs off leash, which are not good for dogs who are scared of other dogs who are going to run up to them. So that kind of thing, I think would potentially, you know, maybe like a resource map. Um, and then you said online, and I think we should probably mention Debbie Jacobs's Fearful Dogs community, which is going to be wonderful, you know, and it's huge. So, and you might even meet other people in your area just because that's how many people she has.
Yes, she has a wonderful group which you'll find on Facebook, and she also has a website, fearfuldogs.com, and she provides a lot of resources, and people come and share information about their own dog, and they get advice, and you get to see other people's stories and what people have been doing working on it. So that's a really helpful online resource. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
And I guess one other thing is depending on how small of a community is it, but if it is kind of a small friendly community, then sharing information about good dog sitters might also be useful. You know, that would be sort of under dog professionals. But if you're going to be going away and your dog can't go to sort of stay with someone else or go to you know, a professional place that watches dogs, then having a good dog sitter who's knowledgeable about fearful dogs is nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so next up we have Claire, who said, about 2 months ago, I adopted two cats who are approximately 6 months old now. They are very cautious about humans, probably as a result of being born in the wild and then chased around to be caught. I'm happy taking my time and they are gaining confidence slowly. However, I'm worried that I haven't given them enough enrichment. They are confined indoors until they are happy with me. They have multiple scratch posts, a cat tower, multiple hiding places at different heights, but they won't be in the same room as me currently. Is there anything else I should or could do until they are happier interacting with me?
I think this is a great question. And I think actually, I mean, for all of these questions, we can see that people are already doing lots of really wonderful things for the pets. So in this case, they've got scratch posts, they've got cat tower, they've got lots of hiding places, and hiding places are important for all cats, but they're especially important for the more fearful kind of cats. Um, I think to me, the thing that stood out from this is that the cats didn't want to be in the same room, and that makes it very difficult to provide play opportunities with a one toy. And that's always one of the things that I like to suggest that people do. I will say that for cats, they have a different sensitive period for socialization than puppies. In kittens, it's between 2 and 7 weeks. So by the end of 7 weeks, that sensitive period has already passed. And depending on the age at which these kittens were caught, I think it's possible that sensitive period might have elapsed before they came into human care. And what that means is these kittens have possibly had not much interaction with people, so they may not be going to become as friendly as a cat who had had good socialization in that time. And one of the things that we find from the research on kittens is that if they have met, I think it's 5 different people in that period of between 2 and 7 weeks, then they're going to go on to become quite friendly to other people. But if they've met and have friendly interactions with fewer than 5 people, actually, these are cats that perhaps are not going to be particularly happy being around other people very much. And what they might do is potentially form a very strong bond with one or two specific individuals, but not be very friendly with other people. And one of the things that we often recommend is that if you have a very fearful animal, and it would apply to a young cat as well, is that you speak to your vet about whether or not medication is recommended. Because certainly with a lot of cats like this, young cats like this coming into the shelter these days, they would often be prescribed medication to help. And as well, there is a desensitization and counterconditioning program that the BCSPCA developed, and it would be worth looking that up online because it's a really good way to teach cats to like people. And it involves keeping your distance to begin with, and obviously using food as a counter conditioning thing. And very often I find that churu treats or similar wet treats are the best thing to work with cats, but every cat is an individual. So it may happen to be that little pieces of tuna or little pieces of prawn or chicken might actually happen to be best. So one thing is to find out which foods these cats like the best, like really, really special foods that you can use for desensitization and counterconditioning. And I would recommend looking up that BCS PCA program. And some of it might also involve just going, if you can be in the same room with them and they're hiding, let them hide. Don't try to force them out of hiding, because hiding is helping them to feel safe. One thing I used to do very often with cats like this is just go and sit in the same room as them, ignore them. They would be hidden somewhere, so they would be safely hidden away and not coming out, and just sit and read a book or look at a film on your tablet or something like that. And maybe eventually over time they will dare to come up to you, and the key is to pretend that you can't see them. Like, the temptation is to want to interact with them, but that might actually frighten them back again, and that's the last thing you want to happen. So just let them do things at their own pace, and that helps. But do look up the BCS PCA guidelines on desensitization and counter conditioning for cats, because they work through it. They had someone actually work through this as a program with fearful cats in their shelter. So there's evidence behind it. They know that it works, and it's a very helpful program to follow, and I think that would be a good thing to do.
God, it just makes me think of Apricot, who came in as a barn cat at probably about the same 4 months. I wouldn't be surprised if it was about that time when he came into our house. And he's like textbook. He is very happy, and he's sitting on my lap right now. He's always sitting on my lap, or Yoan's lap. And he is also very scared of new people. So we have people come over and they don't even believe us that we have a cat, because he'll just be downstairs. But he does warm up to guests if they're staying for a few days. So then they'll find. So I guess if his case is typical and similar, then, there is potentially a lap cat in your future.
Yes, I hope so. And we have a helpful comment in the chat, because someone has said they wonder if sitting outside the door where they can't see you and using a string or a one toy to entice them to play might be helpful. So I think they would still know that you were there, because cats do have good noses, but they wouldn't be able to see you. So that might be one way of breaking it down a little bit, so that they would still come out and play with a piece of string or something. So that you could try it and see if it works. But I think I will put a lot of effort into trying to get them used to your presence as well. Great. I love all these questions. Everyone is already so knowledgeable and doing so well. I think we've got some wonderful questions. So the next one we've got is, what tone of voice should I use with my dog? For example, loud or soft, neutral or emotional, the latter matching how I feel.
So for this, I think this is going to be interesting for us to talk about. My first thought is that I want to never use a tone of voice that makes my dog feel scared of me. So if my dog happens to be scared of loud voices, I would not want to use that around my dog. Or I definitely would want to do some work so that if my dog's going to be somewhere where people are shouting, at some kind of a sporting event or something, I'd want to condition my dog to be comfortable and around that type of voice. So I wouldn't use something that I see startles my dog at any point. As far as the other stuff, one tone of voice which can be really useful when you're training is what we trainers call happy talk. And it's sort of this kind of high-pitched, like, if you ever watch dog trainers train, you will hear a lot of happy talk. You'll hear this kind of like, oh, he's such a good boy, oh, he's like kind of that, or this kind of, and you'll see your dog responding to it naturally. I think that's the thing, is dogs respond to human happy talk naturally. So if you're like, am I doing happy talk right? If your dog is responding naturally in a positive way, then yes, you are. We were having this conversation yesterday about how sometimes men find it a little embarrassing. It's socially inappropriate for them to pull this out. And when I used to teach dog training classes, I had this awesome example of, I saw a video of someone who trained, I think it was explosive type dogs. And it was a man, and he was like a very masculine, testosterone soaked man. And he was just like, I'm going to need everybody to happy talk. And then he just like, he had this room of all these other men. And he's like, if you want to train dogs, this is the tone of voice that we need to pull out. So I was like, oh man, if he can do it, anybody can do it, So that would be, the first two big things that I would say about tone. If you're going to be doing training, getting that happy, squealy, happy talk voice is going to be useful for you. And then not to startle our dogs with loud or menacing or anything like that. And other than that, I don't really, I'm curious to see if there's research or something on this, but I think it doesn't really matter. I talk to my dogs in the same tone that I talk, other than I baby talk to them, and I think that's fine. I love it, and I love it when people do it. I also talk to my dogs like they're humans, and they don't care. So I don't think there's no constraints other than, hey, just don't scare your dog. You can talk to your dogs however you want as long as everybody's happy, in my opinion.
Yeah, and there is some research on this. So we can start with the yelling. We know from the research on using aversive methods with dogs that yelling counts as an aversive method, and shouting at your dog is potentially bad for their welfare, just like any other aversive method is. So it risks causing fear, anxiety, stress, aggression, and so on. And also, we know that there is such a thing that we call pet-directed speech, which is that happy talk, and that it's like baby talk to human babies, except it's directed at pets. So as you said, it's got that higher pitch, and maybe it's a lot of repetition of some of the words as well. And what we know from the research on this is that pets love it. They really like to be spoken to in this way. And so there's been studies where people play different types of speech on recordings to pets to see how they respond. And they orient much more, they pay more attention if someone is using pet-directed speech. So it's really a good idea to use that kind of speech. And we have some of these questions have been about fearful animals, and sometimes it can help a fearful animal just to hear that. It's not going to solve their fears all in one go, but it can just help them to know that you're feeling happy about something, and it can help to kind of coddle them through something sometimes. But the other part of the question, like the very last thing, was emotional, the latter matching how I feel. And another question I get sometimes is, does my dog know if I'm anxious? Does my dog know when I'm fearful? And the research on that says, yes, actually, your dog will look to you. If your dog is stressed, the research shows that dogs will look to you to see whether or not they think they should be stressed. And in the studies on this, they usually use something like a fan with green streamers blowing. So it's something that dogs have never seen before. And
Right.
not all dogs are afraid of it, but for the ones that are a bit nervous of it, they look to see what their human is doing, and the scientists have told them either to say, oh, what a nice fan, this is a really lovely fan, or to act as if like, oh, I don't want to go near this is a horrible thing. And the dogs act differently depending how the person is acting differently. But the thing is, sometimes in our everyday life with dogs, we do feel anxious, and we can't help but feel anxious. And I think it doesn't help to worry about whether or not your dog can tell if you are anxious. And we've seen from some of the research on people crying that dogs will often try to comfort someone who's crying. So I would say don't yell at your dog, but if you're feeling emotional yourself, don't worry about whether or not your dog can detect that. I think you're not a robot, you're a normal human, so you might as well just act like a normal human and don't worry about that specifically. But yeah, the baby talk, do that. Pets love it.
Yeah. There's no reason why you shouldn't do that around your dogs.
Yeah.
I will admit, if I'm around one of my dogs one of our dogs is quite soft, so quite a fearful dog. He finds a lot of stuff in his environment startling. And if I do something like I stub my toe and he's around, I definitely try not to express my true emotions in that moment. I try to keep that for times when he's not around, just because I know that will impact him. So I don't want to startle my dogs just with what's going on in my own head. But, I also am absolutely not perfect. So that would be something that like you say, I wouldn't worry too much about, but
Yeah. I remember one time I got bad news on the phone, and I was actually quite upset. It was when we still had Bodger, and he started running around the room barking. He was like, "Where is it? Where is it? I want to get rid of this thing that's upset you." And it was really
oh,
sweet of him, but obviously he could tell how I was feeling, and that was his response to it. So yeah, I wouldn't want to try and startle them, but it's just part of our relationship with them that they are so good at reading our emotions.
I have this funny thing where, because I'm not a very graceful person and I tend to fall quite a bit. So if I'm out walking or running with my dogs and I fall, when I was in the beginning, I would then give them treats because I'd be like, oh no, they'd run up to me and they're like, are you okay? This is a new thing. I'd give them treats and now they're like, woohoo! So you can also train your dogs.
That's really funny. And actually, there was a piece of research done in Canada where they looked at what dogs do when people fall over and and something bad has happened. And that actually there's been a whole series of experiments like this now, where people are instructed to suddenly fall to the
Fall.
ground and act as if something is wrong. And the funny thing is the dogs don't necessarily pay any attention. Some of them do, but some of them are like, woohoo, now I'm free, I can run and do what I like. But of course I think they probably can tell that the person is acting and doesn't actually have something terribly wrong. So they act, they some of them do act differently. It depends quite a bit on the dog, but yeah, that's an interesting line of research.
For sure. Yeah, I've seen the videos where the people follow and the dog just keeps marching on with the leash dragging.
Yeah.
Those are my spirit dogs. Okay, so we have, I think we're at, as a fearful dog owner, I'm continuously learning what and how to speak in conversations with people when my dog is present, from veterinary staff to other dog owners. What suggestions would you have for me as a dog owner of a dog who is fearful of strangers? How my actions and words affect the person, knowing that my dog is present and she picks up on my tone of voice and levels of stress. Calmness, respectful, less is more. Speaking from my dog's perspective seem effective so far.
And this is a related question, but I feel like one part of this is actually advocating for your dog, because I think if you have a dog who is fearful of strangers, you do need to advocate. And sometimes you actually have to be quite firm with other people to say, no, you can't rush up and pet my dog because my dog doesn't want it. So I think sometimes you do have to be firm just in order to look after your own dog. And I think that's okay. And I think it's better to be firm with the other person, or to say what you need to say to stop them from running up to your dog without worrying about whether the way that you say it is going to upset your dog, because the most important thing is to keep them away. Yeah, I'm not sure what you've got to add to that one, Kristi.
Yeah, I think that would be my point too, is that if you do have a fearful dog, then your body language and your words matter a lot less than physically and environmentally protecting that dog from things that are going to upset the dog. And then I would also say tone of voice. I mean, we just talked about all of these fun tone of voice things. Tone of voice is going to matter way less than a good training plan and good treats. So if you're talking about a fearful dog, and if we have a dog who's fearful of their environment, and we can't keep them from that environment, so they're fearful of things that happen in their daily life, then training needs to happen. And so for that training to happen, we need a good plan, we need good treats, we need good training, and so the whole advocacy and tone of voice is going to matter way less than those things, because then at the end we have a dog who isn't fearful of the things, hopefully that's our goal in the environment.
Yeah, and since veterinary staff were mentioned specifically in the question, I think it's worth saying that it is helpful to let your vet know when your dog is fearful, and to take treats to the vet with you, as well, of course, as working on these things with a dog trainer or through the academy plans on your own, whichever works best for you. And some vets will sometimes let you be present for some procedures, and that can really help the dog. And sometimes the vet will let you go out back even with the dog, even if there's a procedure that has to be done out back, but sometimes they won't let you, and that's the vet's call. So because sometimes it's not safe or suitable for someone else to be out back, or sometimes they're just going to have to get on and do it, and it's much easier for them to do it without you present. So I think that's just a conversation that you have to have with your vet, and ultimately it's your vet's decision. But if they will let you be present at times when it's appropriate for you to be present, then that can help your dog in that situation. And there is a little bit of research on that which does suggest that the owner being present in the physical exams at the vet is helpful for the pet.
Yeah. And I guess also, if you are someone who, and this is very natural for many types of people, you find it difficult to advocate for your dog if someone's being pushy, like, oh, dogs love me, I'm going to pet your dog, kind of thing. There's a couple things that can be useful. One is practicing scripts before you need them. So if this comes up a lot, you have to walk your dog in town and you're constantly coming across people who want to touch you. Maybe your dog is super, super cute. Practice scripts, come up with ways of getting out of that, and then you just have to pull them up. So at the when you're there in the moment, you don't have to be like, oh, what should I say? You can be like, I'll pull up script 2. Sorry, you can't touch my dog, he's in training for service dog. Lie, I don't care, protect your dog. Or you can say, no, I'm sorry, my dog is ill and you can't touch him right now. Okay, and you can also just leave these situations, just turn around and leave. And if this, I know, as this must be like the Canadian in me. That would feel very rude to me to turn around from someone who's like, look at your dog. So you can do something like, oh, oh, sorry, gotta go. Like come up with ways to protect your dog if you're finding yourself constantly having to sort of negotiate this space where you're having to advocate for your dog.
Yeah, and some people will be listening to this in a recording later. So I'll just say that Kristi put the phone to her ear and said, oh, gotta go. So you can pretend that you're taking a phone call. And
Right.
I think saying that your dog is ill, I mean, it doesn't have to be true at all, but it definitely works to keep people away because they don't want to come near your dog and get something from your dog, or for their dog to get something from your dog.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, like when someone else's dog is running up and they're saying, my dog is friendly and your dog is fearful of dogs, that's one of those moments when you need to have those scripts ready to hand to say, my dog isn't friendly, or my dog has something, or
Yeah.
whatever, to make sure that that person is actually going to get their dog on leash, because it's really frustrating when people have their dog off leash in an on leash area where you've gone because you think your dog will be safe on leash and then they're not. So yeah, practicing those scripts in advance is really helpful, and then you just know what to say. And it might feel awkward sometimes, but just feel awkward and do what you need to do to look after your dog.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and someone said in the comments that they have a guide dog and they need to explain a lot of things like don't touch, don't call, and they find that practice makes perfect. So thank you. I think that's exactly what we're trying to say, is that being able to say these things, the more often you say it, the easier it will roll off your tongue, and you'll just say it instead of feeling like stressed about what to do. You'll just come out with this phrase that you're used to saying.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we have another cat question coming up. Melanie asks, what are your thoughts for the chin rest in cats? I feel that the chin rest is a natural position for dogs, but is not nearly as common a position for cats, and much more challenging. I'm assuming much more challenging to train. I understand that it is to keep the cat still and calm while procedures are being undertaken. So while there's veterinary procedures happening to the cat. I'm currently fostering a senior cat, and I'm thinking he might prefer to be on his back or side.
So this is another really great question, and a lot of people who are training dogs for cooperative care will train them to come and put their chin on something and hold still. And that can be a very helpful way for procedures to happen. One of the things that vets often do with cats these days is actually to wrap them in a towel. So maybe it would actually be helpful to get your cat used to being wrapped in a towel. I think that can be helpful because cats are often wrapped in a towel for something to happen, because that's a lower level restraint than some of the other types of restraint. And also it keeps their claws carefully contained and their legs contained. I
Right.
don't think cats particularly like being on their back. On the side, I think, is something that I've seen vets do, and I've actually had the vet techs teach me years ago at my vet hospital to how to restrain the cat on the side with holding both sets of legs together with your hands. So I feel like on the side is a restraint that would be used sometimes, and that's probably quite a useful thing to teach. I don't think cats go and put their chins on things as often as dogs do. Like, you think of a big dog, they'll come and just rest their chin on your lap or on the desk next to you, for example. That's not something a cat would do. And if they're coming near you with their head, it's probably because they like you and they're going to come and they'll be rubbing their head on you. So I think that's a more challenging thing. And I haven't tried teaching that to a cat. I probably wouldn't. I would probably pick being wrapped in a towel first. And for example, my cat Harley gets pilled twice a day, and we started when we did that. We had to wrap him in a towel in order to be able to do it. We don't anymore, but that's something we did at the beginning, and he was actually very easy to train to do that. He's an easygoing cat, so that made it much easier. But you could break it down just by being on the towel and then closing part of the towel over and taking it off again, holding it on there for a bit longer, then holding the other bit of the towel over. So you can break it down into several different pieces to make that easier. And I think that's maybe a better thing to go for. I'd be interested actually to be able to put that question to a vet or vet tech and see what they would think. I think it would be helpful to get those answers. Yeah. So, okay. So the next question is from Henry. My Chihuahua watches TV with me. She follows the plot. She figures out who the bad guy is, and she's learned a few things from watching TV. Is TV watching good for her? I don't know. What do you think, Kristi?
I would say my stock answer to is XYZ good for my pet is is it safe and do they like it? So if your dog is sitting beside you enjoying watching TV and you can tell from their body language, loose, relaxed, happy body language, maybe some happy barking, then yeah. I mean, give dogs more of what they love is I think the easiest answer to any question like this. As far as the particulars of TV watching, I don't have a sense of that. I've never None, all of my dogs see TV watching as an opportunity for snuggles. So they like it that it's happening, but they don't. Maybe they would bark at a dog sound or an ambulance sound or something else that sort of triggered watchdog barking, or they couldn't tell where the sound was coming from. And that was, maybe a little bit upsetting or interesting to them. But yeah, so what do you think?
I really like that this dog knows who the bad guy is. I think that's great. And I would be interested to know, I'm just curious because I'm always curious. I would love to know more about that because I think in TV shows there are multiple ways that they signal who the bad guy is. It's not just that they act like the bad person, but also you tend to get the music that goes with
Music.
it. And
Yeah.
we know that dogs do sometimes have preferences for kinds of music. They probably can pick up emotion from that. So I think that's really interesting. And the thing is, with modern TV screens, they can see them properly. It's not like in the olden days when the TVs would flicker at a rate that meant dogs couldn't watch them. Now
Mhm.
they can. So I think if your dog enjoys it, I agree with your answer, basically, Kristi. It's a good snuggling opportunity. It's kind of together time. If your dog enjoys it and you enjoy it, then that's great. That's fine, I think.
And I mean, if the bad guy upsets your dog, but you still want to watch TV with him, then I would personally, I would be like, I'm going to train my dog to like the bad guy. That would be because that would be a fun training task. It's true
It
that
would
there is
be.
that TV signals to us about who's. I often will joke like, oh, I wish I knew if this was a bad guy or not because it's so obvious in lots of shows.
So I think that's a really nice question too. And great. So we have one last minute question that came in as well, which is from Fiona, which is she would love some guidance on how to cut a cat's nails without having to drug them first. Can it ever be made a normal activity for a skittish rescue cat?
Right.
And so for those who don't know about the having to drug them first part, it's often recommended by vets to, if there is a procedure that needs to be done,
Mhm.
but the animal finds it really difficult, then they will give them some meds to help them make that process easier. And there's nothing wrong with that. That happens to my cat Harley. Every time he goes to the vet now, he has to have medications to help him through it because he has to have a lot of tests and otherwise they would be too stressful for him. So
Yeah.
that's absolutely fine. But it's a great idea to try and train your skittish rescue cat to be happy with it. And I've just temporarily lost my chat window. Okay, there we go. So it's like when we talked about the toothbrushing, one of the things is to break it down into different components and to separate the implement, that the nail clippers basically, from the actual procedure itself. And for the way to do that, then obviously you'll be using lots of wonderful cat treats. So that might be the tuna or the shrimp or those churu tubes or whatever kind of cat food that really, really is something that your cat loves. So even little tiny pieces of cheese, even though cats shouldn't have too much cheese, whatever works for your cat. When they see the nail clippers, then they get a whole load of those treats, and then the nail clippers go away and the food stops coming. So Jean Donaldson calls this open bar, closed bar technique, and it's basically having a party for your pet. When the scary thing appears, which in this case is the nail clippers, you show the nail clippers, you give tons and tons of treats, you take the nail clippers away, and then you stop giving the treats. What I really love about Jean's way of doing this is that it helps people get the order of events right. So there's a lot of technical stuff in how to work with a fearful animal, which I've written a lot about in my upcoming book, Bark, which is about dogs, not cats. It's the science of helping your anxious, fearful, or reactive dog. But the process is the same for cats. And it's important to get those things right. So you show the clippers, you've lots of lovely treats. You're having a party for your cat while the clippers are visible. Then you take the clippers away and the bar is closed and the party's over and the treats stop. So that's one thing, that's the implement part. The other part is getting them used to having their paws handled. And it's probably best if you can do this while they're nice and relaxed on your lap. And if you can just start handling their paws a little bit and then giving lots of treats. And also if you kind of squeeze the paws a bit, the claws are going to come out a little bit as well. So just getting them used to that well in advance of putting those things together and moving as far as clipping the nails. And while you're working on this, if you need to clip the nails in the meantime, make the most of those meds that the vet has prescribed for your cat, because that's really important. And you've probably got something to add to this, because Kristi, because you've got a course on nail clipping and nail trims for dogs, haven't you?
There's a grooming course, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would, just as we're talking about it, I start thinking, so the techniques that we're talking about, desensitization and counterconditioning, are also things that, unlike just training a dog to sit, that's a training technique where our technique as humans, what we're doing with our bodies really matters. So I think maybe downloading the Academy's husbandry project and reading the how-to sheet on training a dog, but same thing, to get a good conditioned emotional response to something will really matter. And the thing that comes to mind is order of events. So this is how particular it is. If you are reaching for the churu on the table before you show your cat the nail clippers, then that's an order of events problem, and your cat may actually learn that you reaching is going to be fearful for them. Like, they're going to learn the wrong association, that churu means scary nail clippers come out, so we don't want that. So there's a lot of really like finicky little details, which once you learn make a ton of sense, and then you can just change the way you're doing it and the training will progress much more quickly. But I think it can really that can really mess training up if we're not attending to these details. So it really matters. And then extra little tiny point, if your cat is already scared of your nail clippers, buy new nail clippers and use those new nail clippers just for training. So those new nail clippers always mean good things. They never, ever mean scary bad things to that cat. So yeah, I would say training technique for sure is something that we really want. It's worth doing the learning, because your training will you will be so gratified at how much more quickly training goes if you're following the sort of the rules of how animals learn is essentially what we're talking about here.
Yes, we've mentioned a number of resources today that are helpful for, especially for fearful dogs. So we mentioned Debbie Jacobs' Fearful Groups. We mentioned the Academy for Dog Trainers and their husbandry plans, which you'll just find on the Academy's website. If you do an internet search for that, you'll find them there. They're really obvious and easy to find, and they will take you through that. Similarly, if you go to my blog, Companion Animal Psychology, I've got a number of posts aimed at fearful dogs, including on how to do desensitization and counter conditioning. That applies equally to cats. So even though the post is aimed at dogs, it applies to cats too. And as Kristi says, these technical details really matter. It's really important to get them right, basically, because otherwise you have the situation where the animal is becoming afraid instead of learning to like something. So if you ever spot that you think that animal should be learning to like something and actually they're being afraid, stop right there. Give them some extra treats to kind of help anyway, because we know that just giving them treats might help. You want to undo that bad association, but then do a bit more reading or practice and think about how you were doing the training to make sure that you get things right.
And reach out to a professional if you need to. This is literally what we do, So if you reach out to a professional and have them vet your technique, or have them help you. It will make a world of difference. And I do want to say that I think the question was, will it ever happen with this cat? Yes, it likely will happen. If you attend to all the details, the likelihood is that you can get your cat to be comfortable with nail trims. Apricot is, and he was very unhandleable when we got him. He wouldn't come up to us. And now he happily chomps churu and lets me trim his nails. So
yes, and I think that's a lovely positive note to end on, because yes, I think it will happen too. The key is that it will take time and you have to do the work and put the work in. So I want to say thank you to everyone for such fantastic questions. We've had really wonderful questions. We've had great comments in the chat as we've been talking as well. It's been really fun to do this as a live episode. So please let us know if you would like us to do one of these as a live episode in future. The recording will go out in due course, which means in quite some time, because there will be other episodes in the meantime before this one actually gets to be published live. But if you want to make sure that you see it, please subscribe to us on social media or subscribe to our newsletters, which you can find on our blogs, or on our websites, basically. And thank you so much for being here with us. It's been a lot of fun. And thank you, Kristi, for joining me today. It's been a really fantastic chat, as always. And we'll see everybody next time.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Bye.